9x minus 3y plus 8xy minus 3. If x equals 10 and y equals negative 2, what is the value of this expression? First, we need to substitute. 9 times x, and we're replacing x with 10. So 9 times 10 minus 3 times y, and we're replacing y with negative 2. Plus 8 times x times y, so times 10 times negative 2, minus 3. Now, we need to follow our order of operations. First would be grouping symbols, but in this case there aren't any. Next would be exponents, and again we don't have any. So after that is multiplication and division, working from left to right. Starting at the left, we have 9 times 10, which is 90, minus 3 times negative 2 plus 8 times 10 times negative 2 minus 3. Our next set of multiplication would be right here. So I'm going to bring down my 90 minus 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, plus 8 times 10 times negative 2 minus 3. Our next set of multiplication would be 8 times 10. So we have 90 minus a negative 6 plus 8 times 10 is 80 times negative 2 minus 3. Then we need to multiply 80 times negative 2. So we bring down our 90 minus negative 6 plus 80 times negative 2. A positive times a negative is a negative, so negative 160 minus 3. Now that we've taken care of all the multiplication, we're now going to work with addition and subtraction, again from left to right. So starting on the left, we're going to start with 90 minus a negative 6. Minus a negative, you can think of this like you're taking away a negative, which is the same as adding a positive, or you can add the inverse. So we have 90 plus 6, 96, plus negative 160 minus 3. Again, we've got to continue working from left to right. So next we have 96 plus negative 160. These two numbers have different signs. 96 is positive, while 160 is negative. Since they have different signs, we need to subtract them. So I'll do that off to the side. 160 minus 96. So to borrow from the 6, it becomes a 5. 10 minus 6 is 4. Now borrow from the 1, it becomes a 0. So I have 15 minus 9 is 6. So 160 minus 96 is 64. And it's going to be a negative 64 because 160, or negative 160, has a larger absolute value than 96 does. So negative 64 minus 3. And the last thing we do is subtract those numbers. So if you think about where you are in the number line, you're at way over here on the left at negative 64. And then you subtract 3, so you're moving more to the left. Your number's getting even smaller. So it's negative 67. Another way to think about it is you have 64 negatives and 3 negatives. That's a total of 67 negatives. And finally, even another way to think about it is you can change it to adding the inverse. So you have negative 64 plus negative 3. Either way, you're going to get negative 67. And that's answer A. Simplify 9x times the quantity 3x squared plus 2x minus 9. To simplify, we need to distribute the 9x to all the terms inside the parentheses. And what that means is we have to multiply. So we multiply first 9x times 3x squared. 9 times 3 is 27. X times x squared is x cubed. Plus 9x times 2x, 9 times 2 is 18. X times x is x squared. Minus 9x times 9. 9 times 9 is 81x. And that would be answer choice B. 27x cubed plus 18x squared minus 81x. So remember that when you multiply x times x squared, you're adding the exponents. And that's where the x cubed comes from. X times x, again, you're adding those exponents, and those have an imaginary exponent of a 1, both of them. So x to the first times x to the first is x squared. You add the exponents, 1 plus 1. And then 9x times 9 is 81x, or negative 81x because of the minus in front of the 9. Evaluate the following expression if x equals 3. X to the 5th times x squared plus y to the 0 power equals. So first we need to substitute 3 for x. So we have 3 to the 5th times 3 squared plus anything raised to the 0 power, x, y, 10, 15, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So that's plus 1. 3 to the 5th times 3 squared is really 3 to the 7th power plus 1. And 3 to the 7th power is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 3 times 3. 3 to the 5th times 3 squared plus 1. Okay, so we have a lot of 3's to multiply. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 plus 1. 9 times 9 is 81 times, and then 9 times 3 is 27 plus 1. Okay, so now we need to multiply 81 times 27. 27 times 81, 1 times 7, 7, 1 times 2, 2, 0 placeholder. 8 times 7 is 56, so write the 6, carry the 5. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 5 is 21. So that's 7, we're adding these together, 8, 1, 2. So 2,187 plus 1, which is 2,188. So that's our answer. Answer D. Expand the following expression. The quantity 2x minus 5 times the quantity x plus 7. And we know it's multiplication because there is no other operator symbol between these two sets of parentheses. There's no addition sign or subtraction or division, which means it's automatically and it's simply understood that we're multiplying these two binomials together. And a binomial just means two terms. So I'm going to use FOIL to help us multiply these binomials. And FOIL is just kind of an easier way to remember what to do when you're multiplying these binomials. The F stands for first, O, outer, I, inner, and L, last. So we start with F, first. And that F tells you to multiply the first terms in each set of parentheses. So that's 2x times x. Those are the first terms in each set of parentheses. 2x times x is 2x squared. The O stands for outer or outside. So now we're going to multiply the two outside terms. And that's 2x and positive 7. Those are on the outside. 2x times 7 is 14x. So plus 14x. I stands for inner or inside. Negative 5 and x are the two inside terms. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Finally, L, last. We now multiply the last terms in each set of parentheses together. Negative 5 and 7 are the last terms in each set of parentheses. A negative 5 times a positive 7 is a negative 35. But we aren't finished yet because we have like terms that we can combine and should. So we're going to bring down the 2x squared and then combine positive 14x and negative 5x. 14x minus 5x is 9x. So plus 9x minus 35. And that gives you answer choice A. In the following inequality, solve for x. Negative 4x plus 8 is greater than or equal to 48. To solve for x, we need to get x alone, which means undoing the operations that are being done to x currently. And that is negative 4 times x and plus 8. So we'll start by getting rid of the plus 8. And we can get rid of it by doing the exact opposite of adding 8, subtracting 8. And if we subtract 8 from the left side of our inequality symbol, then we must also subtract 8 from the right side to keep it even. So we bring down our negative 4x. A positive 8 minus 8 is 0, is greater than or equal to 48 minus 8 is 40. We're almost done. Now we need to undo negative 4 times x. And the opposite of multiplying by a negative 4 is dividing by a negative 4. Now with inequalities, there is a special rule you have to remember. And that is, if you divide both sides by a negative number, or you multiply both sides by a negative number, you have to flip the sign. So now instead of greater than or equal to, our sign is now a less than or equal to sign. And again, that's because we divided both sides by a negative number. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1, and 1 times x is x. 40 divided by negative 4, a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 40 divided by 4 is 10. So x is less than or equal to negative 10. Answer D. What is the value of x? In x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 0. We need to find what number we could substitute for x that would make this equation true. And there's more than one way to do this. One way would be to use the quadratic equation, which is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. And the a, b, and c, those are just the coefficients of your, a is the coefficient of your x squared term, b is the coefficient of your x term, and the c is your constant. But there is another way to solve this that may even be a little bit easier than using the quadratic equation, and that is to factor. So I'm going to factor this trinomial into a binomial times a binomial. I know that x times x is x squared. What I need to find out is what my second numbers are in each set of parentheses. And these two numbers need to have a product of 36 and a sum of 12. And the only two numbers that have a product of 36 and a sum of 12 are 6 and 6. And you can always FOIL what you factored to check and see if it is in fact correct. So you could multiply x times x, and that's x squared, that's your first terms. Outer x times 6, 6x. Inner 6 times x, 6x. And last, 6 times 6, 36. Then you combine like terms, x squared plus 12x plus 36. And we can see that we did factor correctly, because whenever I FOILed my binomials back out, I got what I started with. So now what we have is that some number times another number is 0. And the only way you can multiply numbers together and get 0 is if at least one of your numbers is 0. That means that either this number, x plus 6, has to be 0, or this number, x plus 6, has to be 0. And now we just need to solve our equations. To solve for x, we need to subtract 6 from both sides. So we have x equals negative 6. Or, again, to solve for x, we need to subtract 6 from both sides. So we have x equals negative 6. That means that x is either negative 6 or it's negative 6. And you can substitute that solution back in for x and check to see that it really does work. So that's negative 6 squared plus 12 times negative 6 plus 36. And what I want to know is, does that equal 0? Negative 6 squared and negative 6 times a negative 6 is 36, plus 12 times negative 6 is negative 72, plus 36. And again, I want to know if that equals 0. 36 and 36 is 72, plus negative 72. And I need to know if that equals 0. 72 plus a negative 72 is in fact 0. 0 does equal 0. So we can see that we solved our equation correctly. We found the value of x, negative 6. Simplify the following expression. 64x to the fourth plus 8x cubed minus 4x squared plus 16x, all divided by 8x. So really what we have here is 4 separate fractions. I'm going to break this up. 64x to the fourth divided by 8x plus 8x cubed divided by 8x minus 4x squared divided by 8x plus 16x divided by 8x. Every single term is divided by 8x. So now we can take each one of these individually and divide by 8x. 64 divided by 8 is 8. And x to the fourth divided by x, well, let's see what that looks like. X to the fourth divided by x is x times x times x times x times itself 4 times, x to the fourth, divided by x. X divided by x is 1, so those cancel. And what you're left with is x cubed. So x to the fourth divided by x is x cubed plus 8 divided by 8 is 1 times, and then we do the same thing with x cubed divided by x. So x cubed divided by x would be x times x times x divided by x. X divided by x is 1, so you're left with x times x, x squared. Minus 4 divided by 8. 4 can't really be divided by 8, but we can simplify 4/8 as 1/2. And then x squared divided by x. You may have noticed from these two examples before that when we divide by x, what we're doing, or really when we divide at all, what we're doing is subtracting the exponents. So x to the fourth minus x to the first, or x to the 4 minus 1, x cubed. So here we have x to the 3 minus 1, x squared. So now we have x squared minus 1, or just x, plus 16 divided by 8 is 2, and x divided by x is 1. So our answer is 8x cubed plus x squared minus 1/2 x plus 2, which is answer B. Factor the following expression. 9x squared y minus 18xy minus 27y. The first thing we need to do when factoring is to look and see if there's a GCF for our terms. So I'm going to write down our terms: 9x squared y, 18xy, and 27y. And then I'm going to factor them to see if I can find a GCF. The prime factorization of 9 is 3 times 3, and then x squared, so that's times x, and then times y. So that is the prime factorization of this term. 18 is 2 times 9, and 9 is 3 times 3, times x times y. 27 is 3 times 9, and 9 is 3 times 3, times y. Now to find the GCF, we look for what all three of our terms have in common. All three of our terms have a 3 in common. All three of our terms have another 3 in common. And all three of our terms have a y in common. So the GCF is 3 times 3 times y, 9y. Now we can factor out the GCF. So we're going to factor out a 9y from each one of our terms. 9y times x squared would be 9x squared y. 9y times negative 2x would be negative 18xy. And 9y times negative 3 would be negative 27y. Now we need to look and see if we can factor this trinomial. So bring down the 9y. And if this trinomial can be factored, we're going to factor it into two binomials. Well, I know that I'm going to have x and x as my first term in each set of parentheses, because x times x is x squared. Now the numbers that go here have to multiply to give me negative 3 and add to give me negative 2. So we need numbers that, we need the factors of negative 3 that have a sum of negative 2. Put that in parentheses. The factors of negative 3 that have a sum of negative 2. And the only factors of negative 3 that would have a sum of negative 2 would be negative 3 and positive 1. So negative 3 and positive 1. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, and negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. And we can always FOIL it out to see if it does, in fact, we did factor correctly. So x times x would give us our x squared. X times 1 is 1x. Minus 3x would be negative 2x. And then negative 3 times 1 would be negative 3. So this is our factored answer, which is answer choice C. Simplify the following expression. The square root of 3 times the quantity 5 square roots of 3 minus the square root of 12 plus the square root of 10. Since there is no operator between the square root of 3 and the parentheses, like there's no addition sign or subtraction sign or division sign, it's understood to be multiplication. So I'm multiplying the square root of 3 times all of these terms inside my parentheses, which means we're going to use the distributive property. So I'll start by multiplying the square root of 3 times 5 square roots of 3. So that's 5 times, and then the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which is 3. So that's 5 times 3. The square root of 3 times the negative square root of 12 is the negative square root of, and you just multiply your numbers under the square root. So 3 times 12 is 36. And then the square root of 3 times the square root of 10. So again, we're just multiplying our numbers under the radical. 3 times 10 is 30, so the square root of 30. But we're not finished yet because we have some simplifying that we can do. 5 times 3 is 15 minus the square root of 36 is 6, because 6 times 6 is 36. Plus, now 30. You want to break down that number and see if there is any part of it that we can take the square root of. So to break it down, you can just do a factor tree. 30 is 3 times 10. 3 is prime. And 10 is 2 times 5. And those are both prime. So I have no pairs of numbers and no perfect square factors. So I can't take the square root of any part of 30. So it has to be left as just the square root of 30. And finally, we can subtract 15 minus 6, since those are like terms, and we get 9. So 9 plus the square root of 30. So our answer is A. The quantity y plus 10 squared minus 625 equals 0. Solve for y. The first thing we want to do is add 625 to both sides, because doing that is going to help us get y alone and thus solve for it. So we bring down our quantity y plus 10 squared. Negative 625 plus 625 is 0, so that just cancels out. And that equals 0 plus 625, which is 625. Well, then we want to get rid of this squared because our y is kind of locked in those parentheses. So to unlock them, we want to do the opposite of squaring, which is square rooting. So we square root both sides. And the square root and the square undo each other. They're the exact opposites of each other. So they cancel each other out, and we're just left with y plus 10 equals, and when I take the square root of 625, I get plus or minus 25. And that's because a positive 25 squared would give me 625, but also a negative 25 squared would give me 625. So we really have two answers there. So we write it with a plus or minus. And finally, to solve for y, we need to subtract 10 from both sides. So we have y plus 10 minus 10 is 0, so equals negative 10 plus or minus 25. We have two answers, and to find them, we just need to simplify. So we have y equals negative 10 plus 25, and y equals negative 10 minus 25. All I did was separate the plus or the minus into two separate expressions. Negative 10 plus 25 is 15, while negative 10 minus 25 is negative 35. So our solutions are that y is 15 or negative 35, which is answer D. Solve for y using the following system of equations. 2x minus 6y equals 12. Negative 6x plus 4y equals 42. There are several ways to solve a system of equations. What you need to keep in mind is that what you're doing is finding where these two lines intersect on a graph. So you can graph, that's one way to solve a system, is to graph both the lines and see where they intersect. And then in this case, just give the y coordinate. But you can also use substitution or elimination. And it's really your choice which one seems the best for the situation. In this situation, elimination seems to be the easiest choice. Because if I multiply this top equation by 3, I'll have a positive 6x term and a negative 6x term that will eliminate, thus allowing me to solve for y. So I'm going to multiply this entire top equation by 3. 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times negative 6y is negative 18y. And 3 times 12 is 36. Now I'm just going to add these two equations together. Negative 6x and 6x is 0. They cancel. 14y and negative 18y is negative 4y. Bring down the equals. 42 plus 36 is 78. Then to solve for y, I need to divide both sides by negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1 times y is y equals a positive divided by a negative is a negative, And then I just need to go off to the side and divide 78 by 4. 4 goes into 7 one time. 4 times 1 is 4. You subtracting, get 3. Bring down the 8. 4 goes into 38 9 times. 4 times 9 is 36. Subtract and you get 2. Add a decimal, and a 0. Bring it down. And 4 goes into 20 5 times. 4 times 5 is 20. Subtract and you get a remainder of 0. So it's negative 19 and 5/10, which is answer A. A line passes through points A, negative 318, and B, 5, 2. What is the slope of the line? Well, there are a couple of different ways we can find slope. One would be to graph these 2 points on a coordinate plane and then count between the points the rise and the run. Because that's all that slope is, really. Slope is the change in your y values divided by the change in your x values. Or y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So this first point, this would be our first x and our first y. And then our second point here, B, would be our second x and our second y. And now that we've labeled, we just need to substitute. y2 is 2 minus y1 is 18 divided by x2 is 5 minus x1 is negative 3. And then we simplify. 2 minus 18 is negative 16 divided by 5 minus a negative 8. We can add the opposite, so that's just 8. And we can simplify that. Negative 16 divided by 8 is negative 2. So our slope is negative 2. Which of the following lines is perpendicular to the line y equals negative 5x plus 27? Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. The slope in this equation is negative 5. Because this equation is in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, where the m is the slope. So the slope of this line is negative 5. The slope of a line that's perpendicular to this line would have an opposite reciprocal slope. Opposite meaning opposite sign. So instead of negative, the slope will be positive. And then reciprocal, meaning simply to flip the fraction. So this is 5 over 1. The reciprocal would be 1/5. And again, it's a positive 1/5 because it has to be the opposite. So negative 5 over 1, the opposite reciprocal is positive 1/5. Looking at the answer choices, the only line with a slope of positive 1/5 is answer choice C. So that's the line that's perpendicular to our original line. What is the midpoint of points A, negative 28, and B, 5, 3? To find the midpoint, we can use the midpoint formula, which is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And if you look closely, you'll notice what you're doing is you're adding your endpoint x coordinates together and dividing by 2. That's an average, or the middle of those two numbers. So it makes sense that if you're trying to find the midpoint, that you would find the middle of your x coordinates and then also the middle of your y coordinates. And then you'll end up with a midpoint. So now I'm going to label my ordered pairs x1, y1, and x2, y2. So that now I can substitute. So my midpoint is x1 is negative 20 and x2 is 5. So negative 20 plus 5 divided by 2. And then I'll add my y's and divide by 2. So 8 plus 3 divided by 2. And now we just need to simplify. Negative 20 plus 5 is negative 15 divided by 2. And 8 plus 3 is 11 divided by 2. Negative 15 divided by 2, that's a negative divided by a positive, that's a negative. And it's negative 7.5. And then 11 divided by 2 is positive 5.5. So that is answer choice D. Simplify the following expression. 16x cubed minus 32x squared plus 8x, all divided by 4x. We need to divide each one of these terms by 4x. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this as 3 separate fractions. And now we can simplify. 16 divided by 4 is 4. X cubed divided by x is x squared. Because when you divide, you subtract the exponents. 3 minus 1 is 2. Minus 32 divided by 4 is 8. X squared divided by x, 2 minus 1, is x to the first. Plus 8 divided by 4 is 2. And x divided by x, or x to the first divided by x to the first, 1 minus 1 is 0. Or you can just think x, or anything really, divided by itself is 1. So x divided by itself is 1. And 1 times 2 is 2. So our answer is C. If y equals 2, what is the value of the following expression? The quantity y to the 9th divided by y cubed times 2. The first thing we need to do is substitute 2 for y in our expression. So it becomes 2 to the 9th divided by 2 cubed, and that quantity times 2. And what I want to do is rewrite it. I prefer my fractions to be stacked, so I'm going to rewrite this as 2 to the 9th divided by 2 cubed times 2. When we're dividing and we have our bases the same, so in this case 2 is our base and it's the same, we simply subtract our exponents. 9 minus 3 is 6, so that's 2 to the 6th times 2. 2 to the 6th is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times itself 6 times, and then times 2. So all we have to do is multiply all these 2's. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And then times 2. 4 times 4 is 16 times, and 4 times 2 is 8. So now I just need to multiply 16 times 8. 8 times 6 is 48. Carry the 4. 8 times 1 is 8. Plus 4 is 12. So it's 128. (7m plus 43 equals 160. What is the value of m? So first I'm going to rewrite my equation. 7m plus 43 equals 160. We want to know what number multiplied times 7 with 43 added to that would give us 160. And we could guess and check numbers until we found a number that would satisfy this equation. But there's a much easier and more direct way. And that is to undo the operations that are done to our variable m. We're going to start by undoing the addition of 43. So we're going to subtract 43 from both sides. And as long as we do that to both sides, we keep our equation equal and balanced. If you have something that's equal to something else, and you take away the same amount from both of those things, then they'll still be equal to each other. So we bring down the 7m. Positive 43 minus 43 is 0, so those cancel. And we bring down the equals, and then we have to subtract. And I can't take 3 from 0, so I'll borrow from the 6, that's a 5. Then I have 10 minus 3 is 7, 5 minus 4 is 1, and I bring down my 1 because 1 minus 0 is 1, so 117. Now I have to undo this 7 times m, and the opposite of multiplying times 7 is dividing by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1, and 1 times m is m. 117 divided by 7, I'm not sure what that is, so I'm going to divide off to the side. 7 goes into 11 one time. 7 times 1 is 7. When you subtract, you get 4. And then we bring down the 7. 7 goes into 47 6 times. 7 times 6 is 42. We subtract and we get 5. Then we add a decimal and a 0 and bring it down. 7 goes into 50 7 times. 7 times 7 is 49. We subtract and we get 1. We add a 0 and bring it down. 7 goes into 10 one time. 7 times 1 is 7. We subtract and we get 3. And we could keep going, but really that's all I need to find my answer. The 1 tells the 7 to stay the same if we're rounding to the tenths place, so our answer is 16 7/10, which is answer choice B. X squared plus x equals 42. What is the value of x? We need to find what numbers or number will make this equation true. And there are a couple of different options we have, really, but I'm going to show you how to solve for x by factoring. If I want to factor, then the first thing I need to do is move this 42 to the other side. So subtract 42 from both sides of the equation. So I have x squared plus x minus 42 equals 42 minus 42 is 0. Now I'm ready to factor this trinomial. So I start with my parentheses for my two binomials. And I know that the first term of each parentheses is going to be an x. because x times x is x squared. And then to find my second terms, I need to find two numbers that multiply to give me negative 42 and add to give me a positive 1, because 1 is the coefficient of x. And the two numbers that would multiply to give me a negative 42 and add to give me a positive 1 are 7 and negative 6. 7 times negative 6 is negative 42, and 7 plus negative 6 is a positive 1. You can always check your factoring by foiling. X times x is x squared, x times negative 6 is negative 6x, plus 7x is x, and 7 times negative 6 is negative 42. What I have now is that some number, and I don't know what it is because I don't know what x is yet, but some number times another number is 0. And the only way to multiply two numbers together and get 0 is if one of your numbers is 0, which means either x plus 7 has to be 0 or x minus 6 has to be 0. And then we just solve for x in each equation. So to solve for x on this one, we need to subtract 7 from both sides, bring down the x, plus 7 minus 7 is 0, bring down your equals, 0 minus 7 is negative 7. Or, to solve for x in our second equation, we need to add 6 to both sides. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0, so x equals 0 plus 6 is 6, which means x is negative 7 or it is 6, and that's answer C. Simplify the following expression. 25x to the 6th, y to the 7th, z squared, divided by 5x to the 5th, y squared. I'm going to start by simplifying 25 fifths. 25 divided by 5 is 5. When you divide and you have the same bases, like x to the 6th and x to the 5th, then all we have to do is subtract the exponents. So it's 6 minus 5. And then same thing with y. So it's y to the 7th divided by y squared, or y to the 7 minus 2. And then finally we have z squared, which isn't being divided by anything in the denominator, so it just stays as z squared. So now when we simplify, we have 5, x to the 6 minus 5 is 1, x to the first is just x, y to the 7 minus 2 is 5, z squared. So our answer is B. Expand the following expression. The quantity 4x cubed minus 6 times the quantity negative 3x squared plus 2x minus 5. We need to multiply these two polynomials. And the best way to do that is to be very organized about it. So first, I'm going to multiply 4x cubed times each one of these terms in my trinomial. Then I'm going to multiply negative 6 times each one of these terms in my trinomial. Let's get started. 4x cubed times negative 3x squared. That's a positive times a negative, which is a negative. 4 times 3 is 12. X cubed times x squared, when we multiply like bases, we add the exponents. So 3 plus 2 is 5. That's x to the 5th. Then 4x cubed times 2x. 4 times 2 is 8, so plus 8. X cubed times x is x to the 4th. Just add the exponents. And finally, 4x cubed times negative 5. So a positive times a negative, that's negative 20x cubed. Now we're going to do the same thing with negative 6. So negative 6 times negative 3x squared. A negative times a negative is a positive. 6 times 3 is 18x squared. Negative 6 times 2x is negative 12x. And finally, negative 6 times negative 5, a negative times a negative is a positive, so plus 30. Wow. Our answer is already in least to greatest by exponent, and we have no like terms to combine. So we're done expanding. We just need to find which answer this matches. Negative 12x to the 5th, so A, B, and C all have the same first term. D does not, so we can eliminate D because this has a positive 12x to the 5th term. Then we have plus 8x to the 4th. B has plus 8x cubed. Also, this first term was a negative 12x to the 6th, so we should have eliminated it right there because it should have been to the 5th. So we've now narrowed it down to either A or C. And both of these have the same x to the 4th term, the same x cubed term, the same x squared term. And where they differ right here is the x term. It should be negative 12x. So that's answer A. Simplify the following expression. 16m to the 16th, y to the 4th, z to the 6th, divided by 8m to the 8th, y squared, z cubed, all raised to the 4th power. First, we want to simplify before we raise to the 4th power. So we're going to start with dividing 16 by 8, which is 2. Then m to the 16th divided by m to the 8th is m to the 16 minus 8. Since when you divide like bases, you subtract the exponents. Y to the 4th divided by y squared is y to the 4 minus 2. And z to the 6th divided by z cubed is z to the 6 minus 3. Now we need to simplify our exponents. So we have 2m to the 16 minus 8, 8, y to the 4 minus 2, 2, and z to the 6 minus 3, 3. We have to be very careful to not forget that all of this is supposed to be raised to the 4th power. So we're not done yet. Now we need to raise everything inside our parentheses to the 4th power. So we'll start with 2 to the 4th. Then we have m to the 8th raised to the 4th. We're raising a power to a power, so we must multiply our exponents. So m to the 8 times 4 is 32. Y to the 2 times 4 is 8. And z to the 3 times 4 is 12. Finally, we need to simplify 2 to the 4th. 2 to the 4th means to multiply 2 times itself 4 times. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So 2 times itself 4 times is 16. M to the 32nd, y to the 8th, z to the 12th. So our answer is answer choice D. solve for x using the following system of equations. 3y plus 10x equals 23. 18y minus 15x equals 50. There are many different ways to solve a system of equations. One is by graphing. You would graph the two lines and then see where they intersect. The solution is the ordered pair of the intersection of those lines, because the intersection is the only ordered pair that will satisfy both equations and make them both true, since it's the only point they have in common. You can also use substitution. That's where you solve for one variable and then substitute that expression into the other equation. And then there's elimination. And that's the method we're going to use now to solve for x. Since we want to solve for x, we want to eliminate y. And eliminate means to get rid of. To get rid of y, I need to multiply this whole equation by a negative 6. Because negative 6 times 3y is negative 18y. And then when I add my two equations together, 18y and negative 18y will cancel or eliminate. Negative 6 times 10x is negative 60x. And negative 6 times 23 is negative. 6 times 20 is 120. 6 times 3 is 18, so 138. And now I need to add my two equations together. 18y and negative 18y is 0. They cancel. Negative 15x and negative 60x is negative 75x. Equals negative 138 and 50. When I add those together, I'm going to get a negative, and I can subtract off to the side here. That's 8, and 13 minus 5 is 8, so negative 88. Finally, to solve for x, we need to divide both sides by negative 75. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 75 divided by 75 is 1, times x is x. And again, a negative divided by a negative will give me a positive. And we can divide those off to the side. 75 goes into 88 one time. 75 times 1 is 75. We subtract and we get 13. Add a decimal and a 0. Bring it down. 75 goes into 130 one time. 75 times 1 is 75. Subtract, and we get 55. Add a 0 and bring it down. And 75 goes into 550, I believe, 7 times. 7 times 70 is 490. 7 times 5 is 35, so that'd be 525. We subtract and we get 25. Add a 0, bring it down. And we could keep on going, dividing until we find the end. But since this is multiple choice, we can already see which answer choice is correct. And that would be answer B, 1 17/100. Which of the following lines is parallel to the line y equals 3x minus 12? This equation is in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, where the m is the slope of the line. The slope of our line is 3, and b is the y-intercept of the line, and our y-intercept is negative 12. Now, for lines to be parallel, they must have the same slope, but different y-intercepts. So we're looking for a line that has a slope of 3, but does not have a y-intercept of -12. So maybe we just put a slash that equal sign. We do not want a y-intercept that equals -12. Let's look at b first, because b is in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. As you can see, our m, -1/3, is not the same as our m from our original line. And again, m stands for slope, and our slopes have to be equal for our lines to be parallel. Since this slope is -1/3, it is not parallel to our line. So we've already eliminated one answer choice. Now let's look at C. This equation is not in slope-intercept form. It's in standard form, which is, well, close to standard form. It's by minus ax equals c. And since it's not in slope-intercept form, we do not know the slope of this line. But we can find the slope of this line by transforming it. The first thing we need to do is add 36x to both sides. So we bring down our 12y, our -36x and our positive 36x cancels. We bring down our equals. These are not like terms, so we can't combine them. We just write them down. So a positive 36x minus 144. Finally, we need to divide by 12 to solve for y. 12 divided by 12 is 1, times y is y, equals 36x divided by 12 is 3x, and -144 divided by 12 is -12. Now this looks familiar. It's in fact the exact same equation as our original line. Great, then it's parallel, right? No, they're the same line, so they can't be parallel to each other because parallel lines never intersect. But these lines are going to intersect each other an infinite number of times because they're the same line. They have the same slope and the same y-intercept. So this is also not our line that's parallel to our original line. Now let's look at D. Again, it's not in slope-intercept form. So we have to solve for y in order to find out what our slope and y-intercept is. So we want to subtract 3x from both sides and subtract 12 from both sides. So we have y, positive 3x, -3x cancels, positive 12, -12 cancels, equals -3x minus 12. So first we look at our slopes. The slope of this line is -3, which is not the same as the slope of our line, which means they're not parallel. So it doesn't even matter what our y-intercept is. We know D is not our answer. Well, we're down to our last choice, so hopefully A is going to be parallel. Again, it's not in slope-intercept form, so we have to transform. We need to solve for y by first adding 9x to both sides. So we have 3y, -9x plus 9x cancels, equals, these are not like terms, so we can't add them together. We just write them down, 9x minus 12. And finally, to solve for y, we need to divide everything by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 1 times y is y, equals 9x divided by 3 is 3x, and -12 divided by 3 is -4. So now we found a line that has the same slope as our line, but a different y-intercept. This one's -4 instead of -12. So we found our parallel line. In a coordinate plane, what is the distance between point A, 4, 9, and B, 15, 18? Well, there's a very straightforward way to answer this question. If we want to find the distance between 2 points in a coordinate plane, then we need to use the distance formula. The distance formula is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And the x2, y2, x1, y1, those are just the coordinates of your ordered pairs. For instance, this is my first ordered pair. So this will be my x1, y1. This is my second ordered pair. So this is my x2, y2. Now all we need to do is substitute. So distance equals the square root of x2 is 15 minus x1 is 4 squared plus y2 is 18 minus y1 is 9 squared. And now we need to follow our order of operations, which means grouping symbols first. So distance equals the square root of 15 minus 4 is 11 squared plus 18 minus 9 is 9 squared. Next, our order of operations tells us to take care of our exponents. So the distance equals the square root of 11 squared is 11 times 11, which is 121, plus 9 squared is 9 times 9, or 81. Then we need to add. So the distance equals the square root of 121 plus 81, which is 202. And 202 is not a perfect square, so if I take the square root of it, I'm going to get an irrational number, a decimal that just keeps on going. So our answer is simply the square root of 202. Calculate the point of intersection for the following lines. 6x plus 3y equals 24, and 5y minus 10 equals 15x. There are a few different methods for finding the intersection of two lines. One is graphing. And you can just graph the two lines and find where they meet. Sometimes, though, that can be hard, especially when your answers look like this. You can also use elimination, or, like we're going to do on this problem, you can use substitution. And in order to substitute, I need to solve for one of my variables. Looking at my two equations, it looks like it's going to be pretty easy to get y alone in this second equation. And I'll do it in 2 steps. First, we add 10 to both sides. Bring down the 5y. Negative 10 plus 10 is 0, equals, these are not like terms, so just write them down. Then we need to divide everything by the coefficient of y, which is 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, times y is y, equals 15x divided by 5 is 3x, and 10 divided by 5 is 2, so plus 2. Now that I've solved for y, I can substitute this expression, 3x plus 2, in my other equation for y. So I'm going to substitute that right there, which means that I now have 6x plus 3 times, instead of y, I'm replacing it with the expression 3x plus 2 equals 24. And now we need to solve for x by first distributing. So 6x plus 3 times 3x is 9x. 3 times 2 is 6, so plus 6 equals 24. Next, we need to combine like terms. 6x plus 9x is 15x. Plus 6 equals 24. Then, we need to subtract 6 from both sides. So 15x equals 18. And finally, we need to divide both sides by the coefficient of x, 15. That's 1 times x is x equals 18 divided by 15. We can do that right over here. 15 goes into 18 one time. That's 15. Subtract and you get 3. Add a decimal and a 0. Bring it down. And 15 goes into 30 two times. So 1 2/10. Now we're halfway there. And once you find x, it actually gets a whole lot easier to find y. Now that we know what x equals, we can use this expression, or this equation, y equals 3x plus 2, and simply substitute what x is into this equation, and we'll have y. So I'm going to replace x with 1 2/10. So y equals 1 2/10 times 3 is 3 6/10 plus 2. So y equals 5 6/10. Finally, we need to put both of these coordinates together as an ordered pair. X is 1 2/10 and y is 5 6/10, which means our answer is C.